Welcome back to Toni Told Me, your cozy corner of the internet for the real talk and the real tea. If you haven't already subscribed to us on YouTube or wherever you get your podcast, make sure you do that. And if you're not following us on social media, I'm going to side-eye you. So I've been telling you guys for a while, at Toni Told Me Pod on Instagram and on TikTok. Today's episode is all about you. Yesterday kicked off Mental Health Week here in the UK. And to celebrate, well, do we want to celebrate Mental Health Week? I guess so, yeah, because it's important to talk about mental health. So to celebrate, we are having a very special episode. We're going to be tackling back-to-back dilemmas with our very special guest here, Dr. Jade. Thank you for coming on to the pod.
Thank you for having me.
If you don't know much about Dr. Jade, she is a licensed psychologist and founder of Lux Psychology Practice. And today, we're going to get into the nitty gritty of all the dilemmas you sent in via the Instagram page. I have a feeling this episode is going to be super relatable for a lot of people. So you're going to want to stay tuned. So Dr. Jade, what have you been up to? How's life treating you?
Been very busy. Work has been really busy. We are currently taking on some more practitioners at Lux Psychology Practice. So I've been interviewing for that. And we're currently in the process of moving our London office from Mayfair to Wimpole Street. Okay. So it's all been a bit go. And then on top of that, I've been trying to exercise and self-care and all of that. So it's been busy.
How do you stay on top of it all?
I don't know. I try my best. I try to prioritise things. You could argue I'm quite type A. Okay. I like a list. I like a schedule. I like a plan. So I think that's probably how I stay on top of things.
Funny you should mention type A. I used to think I was a type A person until I watched a TikTok the other day and I realised I'm absolutely not a type A person. So this lady made a TikTok about how she's type B and how she'll procrastinate and do things like last minute, about how she'll save 1 million recipes and she will never cook a single one.
Oh my God, that's so many.
About how she'll show up at the airport and then she'll be checking in as she's making her way to the airport desk.
No, I could not do
and
that.
I was watching that and I was like, oh crap. Well, I thought I was an organized person, but clearly I'm very type B because I'm very que sera, whatever will be, no pun intended, whatever will be. So I admire people who are type A because I feel like type A people are typically go-getters, hustlers. A lot of world leaders, in my opinion, are type A. And I need to learn to be more type A. And before we get into the dilemmas, I did want to just pick your brain a little bit about what you do. What is the hardest part about your profession?
So I think the hardest thing about my profession as a psychologist, it's a hard one to answer. I think sometimes falling into that wanting to help people role and save people at time, that almost saviour feeling, when actually that isn't my role, essentially. Obviously, I'm there to support people and in a sense I am there to help people, but I'm not there to fix their problems.
Okay.
Sometimes I fall into Mrs. Fix-It, which I try not to, but it's in my nature. So I think that's quite hard at times.
I think it's quite important that you said that because I do believe a lot of people go into therapy with the hope or the belief that someone else will save them. But that's not what therapy is about, is it? It's about giving you the tools to save yourself, essentially.
Yeah. And it's more guidance as opposed to fixing problems as such. So, yeah.
Okay, well, you're in the right place because this episode is all about guidance. So producer Anisha is going to kick off this segment, which is Tea Time with Toni. Typically, during Tea Time with Toni, we have 2 dilemmas. But as we've kicked off Mental Health Week, this is a special episode where we've got back-to-back dilemmas, and that's going to take up the chunk of the show. So producer Anisha, our lovely producer, has sifted through the hundreds of dilemmas we got last week, and she's picked out a few. And we're going to tackle them together. I say together, but I feel like the expert in the room is going to tackle them, and I'm going to ad-lib.
I'll try.
So producer Anisha, can you please hit us with the first mental health dilemma?
So our first dilemma says, "Hey Toni, I've got a dilemma that has been really weighing me down and I hope you can help. People always say I'm strong and independent, but sometimes I don't want to be. I want someone to check in on me, to notice when I'm not okay without me having to scream for attention.
Oh my gosh, this is actually so relatable. So relatable. And in the past, I've tweeted about like hyper independence in women.
Yeah.
And a lot of women who are, I imagine type A as well, like very on the ball, very strong, very resilient, go through life without being offered support because it appears that they have everything under control.
Yeah.
How, I'm going to say we, because I'm one of these women, how do we tackle that? Like, how can we get support when the world thinks we don't need it?
Yeah, I can relate to that as well, I think. I think as a business owner, people are like, oh, you don't need support, especially in the field that I'm in as well.
Yeah.
So I can also relate to it. I think it's about knowing that being vulnerable is not a bad thing at times. And you don't always have to look like you've got your shit together all the time.
Yeah.
Because that's not human. Like, we're not asking people to be robots.
Yeah.
And I say that to clients. I'll say, like, you're not a robot at the end of the day. It doesn't make you weak to ask for support. And equally, on the other side of that, I would say that people in your life aren't mind readers. And it's something I've had to learn sometimes, that people aren't mind readers. And I say this to clients as well. And I think sometimes we do go through life thinking people can read our mind.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we don't ask for what we need.
Yeah.
So I think if you've got a like really good support network, whether it's friends, family, people that you're close to, or a partner that you feel like you can be vulnerable to, ask them what you want when you want support. What does that look like as well? Because otherwise they're not going to know.
Yeah.
And it doesn't make you weak by asking for that. It actually makes you very assertive.
Yeah.
So I think it's about sort of shifting the way that you look at things, and actually recognizing that it doesn't mean that you're not strong. It's just that you're human at the end of the day. And we do sometimes need to lean on others. We do sometimes need that support from other people. And then you can be really clear as to what that might look like. Could you just check in with me, or could you just, now and again, it would be really helpful if you just drop me a text and ask how I'm doing. It could be something as simple as that. So that would be my advice for that dilemma.
That's such good advice, because I do feel like when you are someone who does appear to have your shit together or tries to appear in that way, it could be so hard to ask for help.
Yeah.
And it's like nice to hear someone say, actually, it's normal. It's actually weird if you always have your shit together. It's like unnatural.
Nobody does. Show me a person that, and I'll say this to clients, I'll be like, nobody does. Although on the surface, on Instagram and stuff, it might seem like that. We know, we actually know that that's not possible. And usually people that look like they've got their shit together, they're almost like, what is it, like ducks
like
or
a
swans?
duck,
or like
with their feet paddling on water. I feel like that is literally my life.
Yeah, same. Literally same.
Yeah, so it's
I find it so hard to like even bring the subject up. Like if I'm really struggling with something, it's only until I reach melting point that I'm like, help me, I'm drowning.
You are literally like me. Like I had a breakdown about a week and a half ago. I burst into tears in my kitchen, and my mum and sister, no, it was my sister first, and then I burst into tears to my mum. And I was chatting to my sister about like how I have so much stuff to do. And then next thing I knew, I was like, and the wedding, and then a book, and then I have to write this, and no one's helping me, da, da, da. And my sister, bless her heart, she was looking at me. You know when someone's trying to hold in their laughter? She was looking at me, and she like, I could tell she cared, but she was trying to hold in her laughter because she's like, bruh, like it didn't have to get to this point. So she was like really, really trying to be like caring and considerate, and she's hugging me, and I can, when you can feel someone's chest like
starting to laugh.
And then she's like, Toni, she's like, why do you do this? And I'm like, do what? She's like, why do you just hold everything in and then explode? She's like, the way you've just like broken down. She's like, I'm so sorry. I don't want to laugh, but I'm just like, you do this all the time. Like, just ask for help. And to her, it's just a normal thing, like ask for help. And I think because she's the youngest, she navigated life asking for help. It was part of her like natural dynamic with people. Whereas with me being the oldest, it wasn't part of my natural dynamic.
You had to be the leader.
So I relate to what Anisha said, because I really struggle with like opening my mouth. And what you said reminded me of two quotes. The first is closed mouths don't get fed.
Yeah.
And the second is if you don't ask, you don't get.
Yeah.
Two things I completely believe in, but it is very hard to ask when you're not used to asking. You don't want to seem like needy. You don't want to seem like a burden, especially like in romantic relationships as
That's
well.
the worst for me. Like when it comes to talking about like my feelings or like I need you to like help me a bit here, like with something, I can't do it. I can't do it.
Point blank.
I literally like I try so hard and then I say the wrong things and then I get too emotional because I can't get my words out. Like it's just a car crash every single time.
I sometimes explain it to clients, you know, when you said that you just reached breaking point the other day, I'll sometimes explain it like a Coke bottle or a lemonade bottle. Every time you have like a stressor, you give it a shake and you keep shaking it, what's going to happen? It's going to explode.
Oh gosh,
So sometimes you've got to let some air out and then, you know, keep sort of letting that air out in order. And that could be you asking for help or just checking in with somebody or whatever it might be. And I think that's a lot of my clients, they sort of benefit from therapy in that way.
Yeah.
It's not necessarily, it might be that they've been in therapy like quite long term at this point, or they haven't necessarily come to therapy with a very specific goal. It's actually just their sort of weekly check-in with how they're doing. And actually, if things have got a bit much, it allows them to just navigate it and not feel as overwhelmed. And sometimes I'll get clients and we'll have to put the agenda to one side because they'll just say, I'm just so overwhelmed with all of these things I've got to do. And I'll say, well, there's no point if you're sat here feeling really overwhelmed with everything that you've got going on in your life at the moment. There's no point us delving into your childhood trauma. Like, let's deal with what you've got currently going on, and then we can always delve into that later on if needed or next week. So sometimes you can think about it maybe like a bottle of Coke.
I am constantly shaking that closed bottle of Coke. And I need to,
I think I'm on my third bottle of Coke.
How many bottles have you shook this year?
4.
I remember, I'm not currently in therapy, but I was going to therapy for a while. This was in my late 20s. And do you know how I know that I needed it? Because in my first therapy session, I didn't know this man from Adam. I burst into tears. I started talking about like random stuff and I started crying. I was like, what the hell is going on? And then I realized in that moment exactly what you just said, that I just need to talk to someone because I'm not used to like, well, now I am. I'm better because my partner has helped me a lot. But back then I wasn't used to showing people my vulnerabilities and the things I was struggling with. And to like speak to a stranger was really helpful because then I could be like, actually, I'm really struggling with this. I really, really suffer when this happens. I can't cope with this. It's much harder to tell someone I don't know than to tell someone I know. But that's been so helpful. I thought, that's been helpful for me. This is like free therapy. Wonderful. Dilemma number 2, please, producer Anisha.
So this one says, hello, internet big sis and producer Anisha. From the outside, it looks like I'm doing well, good job, nice car, living comfortably, but inside I still feel empty and disconnected. It's like I've achieved everything that I thought I wanted and it still isn't enough. I can't seem to get rid of this feeling. What do I do?
Wow. So how does that happen? And I say that because there are a lot of people listening who may not feel so accomplished. And they believe that in becoming accomplished, that feeling of emptiness will disappear, or feeling of being stagnant will disappear. But from what we've heard, this young woman has achieved a lot and still feels empty. Why might that occur in someone's life?
I think that's quite common in today's society because I think we're constantly in this world where a lot of us are living for this external validation, external success, external materialism. So I think it is quite common. And I don't know if you've read the book, it's by Stephen Bartlett, but it's not The Diary of a CEO, it's his other one, Happy Sexy Millionaire.
Oh, no, I haven't.
And that sort of outlines this dilemma in a way, and it's essentially that he thought he would be happy when he could like buy a Range Rover or something like that. And then the day finally came where he could afford that Range Rover, let's say, and he actually realised that that wasn't what was going to make him happy.
Okay.
Or it's very short term, it's very short lived. So I think it is a very common experience, especially for a lot of young people, and sort of that living with that keeping up lifestyle. Something that I would do if this, for example, if this was a client, I would do some values work, which comes from acceptance and commitment therapy, which is a sort of a strand of CBT therapy, cognitive behavior therapy. And values work is really, really interesting, and I really enjoy doing it with clients because it essentially, it's sort of, I explain it as we are very goal orientated as humans, and we sort of live goal to goal. So it might be you graduate university, let's say, and then you get a job, and then you get a promotion, and then maybe you've got some life goals in there, like you get engaged and you get married and you have family, etc., etc., and then you retire, and it's very like goal checkpoint orientated. Values are the stuff in between that. So how are you living between those goals? Okay. Which often we completely disregard, we completely miss. Yeah. And that's why it's so important when we do it in therapy, because people will look at these like lists of values, and you can find them online if you just type in like values, acceptance, and commitment therapy. You could find some examples, but it might be like what's important to you in terms of how you're living, not what you're doing and how you're getting to those goals, but actually how you're living between that. So that would be what I'd maybe suggest for this person, is try and identify what your values are, and are you living to them? Because maybe it sounds like by this dilemma that you're not.
A lot of people talk about values, but I don't think people actually consider what they are. And I think how you described it was great. It's not the goal, it's not the end result. It's the day-to-day living, like what you hold dear. Dr. Jade, what about you? Like when you think about your values, what are some examples?
When I was training to be a psychologist, and we were being taught about values work within acceptance and commitment therapy, my lecturer at the time, she actually said that she never does values work with a client until she's done it herself. And so I sat down and I did it myself. And they can be really in-depth. So they can be things like flexibility, honesty, things like that. So they almost go a little bit beyond like family and friends of like actually what's really important to you. So I know that flexibility is really important to me. I have my own business, I work for myself. I enjoy that flexibility of my lifestyle. Yeah. In terms of thinking about people, honesty, humour is also really important to me in terms of the types of people I surround myself with.
Yeah. I love that you, sorry to interrupt. I love that you said humour, and I'll explain why I love that you said humour. So the other day, sorry, I'm totally going off a tangent right now. The other day, I posted a tweet where a guy asked he was like, this girl met this guy, she's single, and then she said, he's a really good guy, but he's not for me. And he's like, ladies, what does this even mean? This is like so silly. And loads of guys were chiming in like, yeah, it's so dumb. Ladies don't know what they want. And then I said, a man can be a good man, right? He can have good character traits, but he may not be good for you. Mm. And as my example, I said, your values might not align. So for example, if he has a completely different sense of humor, if he has completely different interests as well, if he prioritizes different things, he could have good character. But if one of my values is travel, I love travel, like the ability to do that. If I value travel and I value humor, and he doesn't value any of those things, then we may not work long term, even though he has good character. Yeah.
So he's not for you.
Yes. Yeah. And then the rebuttal from some men was like, oh my God, there's more important things than a sense of humor. And I was like, no, humor can be a value for someone. Yeah. Like it's, when people say your values should align, someone having like good sense of humor,
that's going to make like the darkest times a bit better.
So I'm so glad the doctor said humor can be a value, because the guys were trying to come for me and say humor is not a value, and I'm like, yeah, no, you can really value humor in your dynamic, in your life, in your relationships.
But I completely agree with you, because in relationships, when I do relationship work with clients, whether that is as an individual or as a couple, I'll pull out values work, and it'll be identifying what their values are for themselves, but also in a partner. Yeah. And you're quite right. If they don't align, the relationship is maybe not going to work. Yeah. I'm not sort of blanketing that and saying that it's not going to work and you're doomed, but but there's going to be something that you disagree on. And I guess if your fundamental values don't align, that's when you find problems in relationships.
Yeah. And I guess with this dilemma, where you've said like she should sit down and pull her values out, I completely agree with you, because if someone's feeling unfulfilled, there's a big chance like how they're living day to day doesn't feed them, right?
Yeah.
And for me personally, to feel like fed and to feel like my cup is full from how I'm living, I have to feel like, yeah, my values are being checked off.
Yeah.
It's part of what makes me me. Like if someone said, Toni, no more travel, no more cracking jokes with people close to you. I want you to be dishonest in your day-to-day. I want you to be pretentious in your day-to-day. I will feel empty because I feel like actually I'm not living my truth. I'm not being authentic to who I am and the things I hold dear. So maybe that is it. Maybe, unfortunately, for whatever reason, she has all this amazing stuff, but she feels like actually what feeds her and her values is being disregarded. And as an example, so I have a family member who was in a similar position where she had a lot and she just felt so empty. And then I guess it's different for everyone. And then she got into a relationship and got married, had kids. And then all of a sudden she felt like, oh, so much happier. And I don't think it was the relationship and the kids that did that. I think that relationship and the kids reaffirmed her values. Because one thing she really valued was spending time with loved ones, that family and friends time. And when she was working, she wasn't doing that. One thing she really valued was the ability to travel, just like me. And when she was on the grind, she wasn't doing that. But when she met her partner, new relationship, you're traveling, you're going on vacations. And people can sometimes assume that like, oh, it's the checklist that makes you satisfied. Oh, it's because she got married and she had a kid. No, it wasn't the getting married and having the kid. It was what they came with.
Yeah.
And reigniting those values for her and making her like remind herself that actually there are things beyond work that are important to me. I just forgot about those things.
Yeah. And I'll sometimes, this sounds really morbid, but I'll sometimes say it to clients of, you know, what do you want written on your tombstone? That you worked 45 hours a week?
That's a good way to
like
put it.
It sounds morbid, but it just puts things into perspective, I think, at times. And I think as well, I've spoken quite a lot in recent interviews and stuff that I've done about internal versus external validation, and that a lot of things sometimes we do for external validation, but you've also got to find that fulfillment. You've got to find that balance of what's also internally validating you. Like you said, of your friend who had a family was internally validating for her, and probably giving her internal motivation as well.
Yes,
you know, so I think you've got to also think about that as well, and it's not just that you're going to ignore everything else, but it's about finding that balance. And maybe this person who's written in for the dilemma hasn't quite found that balance yet. They've seemed to have found the external stuff, but maybe not the internal stuff yet.
I think I need to go back to the drawing board of my values, guys.
I'll give you a values sheet.
Please. I think I need it. So our next dilemma says, "Hi, Toni. I cannot tell you how much I love your podcast. It truly is one of the highlights of my week, but I need your help/advice. I've been thinking about getting therapy, but part of me feels ashamed. In my community, talking about mental health isn't really a thing. It's seen as a weakness. I don't know how to explain it to my parents without them thinking something's wrong with me."
When she says in my community, I'm going to assume that she's Asian. If not, she's African. If not, she's Caribbean.
Yeah. Yeah.
Those are my assumptions, because those are the communities where, unfortunately, therapy can sometimes be frowned upon. Yeah.
And talking about mental health in general, I think.
Yes, that is so true. That is so true. So just veering off slightly from this dilemma, it reminds me of a stat I saw online, and it was talking about like the happiest countries in the world. And some data had been pulled, and they had interviewed people from different countries to determine their level of happiness. And UK was very, very low, unsurprisingly, unfortunately, because it's a rat race here. And I don't know what the government is doing with the economy, but you know what? I'll leave that for another podcast episode. But the number one at the time, I'm Nigerian. The number one happiest country in the world, allegedly, was Nigeria, right? Now, bear in mind the rates of political corruption, the rates of economic poverty. Despite that, Nigeria was number one. So Nigerians were celebrating like, oh, happiest nation, happiest nation. And I looked at it with a side eye. I can't lie. Because I know how culturally we perceive mental health struggles. So I looked at that data and I thought, is it that Nigerians in Nigeria are the happiest people in the world? Or is it that as a Nigerian, when you go to your mum to say, mother, I'm depressed, she says, depression? What is depression?
Yeah.
Shebi, you have food, you have a house. How can you be depressed? You're happy. And then you invalidate the mental health issues and the struggle you're going through because depression shouldn't exist where you come from. So that's why I side-eyed the data, because I felt like the happiest countries in this list, is it that they are inherently happy, or is it because culturally they will not tick depressed on the data sheet? Yeah. They will not tick bipolar or even acknowledged it on the data sheet. They will not tick low mood or anything associated with anything other than happiness, and that skews the results. So that dilemma just reminded me of that.
Be interesting how they collected that data.
Yeah.
If it was it a question, was it a tick box exercise? Or, was it in-depth interviews with like thousands and thousands of people? Because you're so right.
Yeah, because if you ask the average Nigerian, they say, Nigerians, we're never last. We are the happiest. I'm so happy. But are they truly happy?
Yeah.
So going back to this dilemma, how would we confront that situation? Wanting to go to therapy, but feeling like there's a stigma attached to that, and explaining that desire to family members and friends who side-eye therapy.
It's a tricky one. And I think it maybe depends on their age, because if they are an adult, they are well within their rights to go to therapy. It's completely confidential, and they actually don't need to share that information with family if they feel like it's going to be judged or stigmatized. However, if they maybe are under 18 and they maybe need parents' permission, then obviously it's a bit more tricky. But I think, it doesn't sound like we've got to share with the person who's written in that, doesn't mean that you're weak or anything by going to therapy. It's actually a really good thing, because it sounds like they've already made that decision themselves by wanting to go. But I guess it might be just around gently broaching the topic and educating your family around, and maybe framing it in a way of that it's more for self-care as opposed to fixing a mental health issue. Because I think sometimes when you find this stigma, it's what's wrong with you. There's nothing wrong with you.
Yes.
And you don't have to go to therapy because there's something wrong with you.
Yeah.
So maybe you could potentially frame it. Obviously, it's really hard to say because we don't know what they might receive or the level of stigma that they might receive. But I think it's about framing it in more of a self-care way and an empowering way, that actually you're doing it because it's like a form of self-care, in the same way that you go to the gym.
It's like servicing your car.
Yeah.
Your car doesn't have to break down.
For you to service it.
It doesn't mean there's something wrong with your car. It just means you want to keep it going. And
it's so true. And sometimes I'll say, therapy is like going to the gym. Why do we go to the gym? We go to the gym because we know it's a healthy decision. Why, you're not going to sit and just eat McDonald's all the time and not exercise because you know that that's unhealthy. So sometimes it's you could maybe frame it in that way. And maybe it's around gently psychoeducating your friends and family, dependent on obviously how big the stigma may be.
It's great though that there were two options. There was educate, but if you don't feel like that will work, nobody has to know. And that's the great thing about therapy and going to a professional. There is that like confidentiality element. I think sometimes, especially within like ethnic minority communities, people can wrongly assume that, if I speak about all the things I'm going through, that could leak or reach someone, or people will find out, when in reality that is not how therapy works. The professional you go to is licensed and managed by a legal implication. They have to keep everything you say confidential, and if not, they could lose their license. That's how serious it is. But a lot of people aren't aware of that. And it's nice to know that actually you don't have to tell anyone, and your therapist will not tell anyone either.
And if you do go with that option and you are in the position where you can seek therapy without informing your friends and family, then it might be something that you could work through in therapy, that you could work through with your therapist as well, and talk to them about it. I know that I've got clients, and I think as well, it's not just culturally, but it can also be like generational as well.
Yes, that's so true,
actually.
Because I've got a lot of young clients, and sometimes their parents are aware that they're in therapy, perhaps they're even funding it for them, but they'll sometimes say to them, oh, why are you still in therapy? And then my client will share that with me. And that can be really hard, but it's something that we can work through together of how they can maybe have that conversation with their parents around it. Yeah. So that's also an option if they can maybe just go to, seek out a therapist without needing their parents' approval.
Oh, yeah. So your therapist could help you share that you're seeing a therapist. I like that. Okay, producer Anisha, dilemma what are we on now? Number 4?
Yes, we are on number 4. So this one says, hey Toni, how do I even begin to deal with PTSD after coming out of a toxic relationship? Oof. I honestly thought it was over, but the minute I get close to someone new, all the old fear, mistrust and anxiety comes rushing back. I don't want to drag my past into something good, but I feel stuck, like I'm living in survival mode, even though I'm supposed to be moving on. How do I heal without pushing people away?
I know this dilemma is going to be so relatable for a lot of people because there are a lot of us who have been through difficult relationships, and sometimes that comes with like a bit of baggage.
Yeah.
I would love to hear your perspective on one's ability to move into a new relationship while still having some like underlying trust issues or issues in general, because we often see online that, heal before you enter a relationship, heal. But I guess my query to that would be like, who is fully healed? Like, we're all suffering from a little bit of something in different ways. Like, at what point do you say I'm healed enough? Do you have to be fully healed to enter something new, or can you heal while getting to know someone while entering something new?
I think it depends on the individual.
Okay.
And I think it depends on the partner.
Ah, good point. You're right. Yeah, you're right.
So, and also, I think what I pulled out of that dilemma was I should be moving on.
Yes.
What does that look like? Who's told you should be moving on? And are you taking moving on as I should be dating other people? Because you can be moving on doing your own thing.
Yeah, that's so true.
Focusing on yourself, that can also be moving on as well. It doesn't mean that you've got to get back out there and date if you don't feel ready to do that. So, yeah, that was just something that I pulled out of that dilemma, that sort of like should mentality. And yeah, I think it's a really tricky one because it sort of goes back to, and similar to what you were saying, of what does fully healed look like? Yeah. Who gives us the green light of like, okay, you're ready, you're good to go, off you go on your way. I mean, maybe that should be a thing. Maybe it would stop people getting into further relationships and it being more traumatic. But yeah, I think it is a tricky one because you've got to be self-aware in yourself to know when you are ready. Yeah. And I think also with that, you might not know that you're not ready until you've maybe tried. Yeah. And you've dated,
what's
and then
happened to me though. Like you think you're fine, and then you get involved with someone. I'm like, oh, something's coming up again. I thought I'd dealt with that.
But I think that's also really normal because it's the same as childhood. Like our childhood experiences, they don't anything traumatic. They don't just suddenly disappear. It's not like you suddenly, have memory loss about that traumatic experience. Yeah. And even when we do trauma work in therapy, I'll say to clients, it's not that I'm trying to erase it from your brain, that it's happened. It's so that you can look back and think, do you know what? That happened. It was really unpleasant. It was really hard. It was really traumatic, but I'm not there anymore. And it's about having that differentiation of that you're no longer in that scenario anymore. Yeah. Because with trauma, our brain tricks us, and it's our brain's way of sort of helping us in a way, and it's like a survival tactic. But with trauma, our brain is essentially telling us that you're back in the same cycle and you're back in that traumatic situation again. So that's when people have like triggers and flashbacks and memories. It's essentially your brain's way of going, we're going back in it again, and we're in that same cycle. And the trauma work that we do in therapy is trying to help you firstly understand what happened, process it, and then be able to look back and say, that happened, it was horrible, and I learned this from it, and I never want to go through that again, but I'm not there anymore, and I'm in a better place now, and I'm safe, and I'm happy, and whatever it might be.
I think that was an ideal thing for the person who sent this dilemma to hear, because she's obviously saying that, like, she fears that it sounds like kind of she thinks she's self-sabotaging, basically. That she's bringing the old fears into this new situation. But like you said, Dr. Jade, it's about remembering that this person is not your ex. This is a different person. In that situation, if she's constantly bringing up that past trauma that happened in the previous relationship and it's impacting her new one, would you say that it's best to cease and say, you know what, let me work on myself and not continue? Should she continue and try her very best to separate those two situations? Should she try and go to therapy? Like, what kind of like tangible thing could she do on her own to manage that? Because like listening, I'm like, okay, if it was me, would I feel like, okay, no, I need to just do some self-work? But what if you really like the person?
Yeah.
What if you really like the person? You don't want to lose them.
You let them go.
Yeah.
I think you've got to, there's a few things. I think having that self-awareness, which therapy can be a great way to build that self-awareness, can be really helpful in a scenario like this. And especially if you really feel a trauma as well, that, you know, you can do that trauma work in therapy with a professional. But I think also it's one of those things that, are you actually seeing red flags based on your previous experience? Think about what you've learned from that previous experience, because we've learned something, you know? And I actually had a supervisor once tell me, any like bad situation, you don't want to be shortchanged, she used to say. So like, what have you learned from it? You don't want to come away shortchanged. It was like her saying. So what have you learned from that situation? Are you seeing the same pattern repeat? In which case, maybe, you know, you're not self-sabotaging here.
Maybe it's
valid. Or are you looking for red flag? Are you sort of nitpicking at this point? In which case, then maybe, yes, you might find yourself self-sabotaging. So I think it's about sitting down and being really honest with yourself. Write it down, like journal it.
Yeah.
What are you actually concerned about? And then you can look at it and think, is that something that I like? Is that a red flag, or am I nitpicking at this point?
You are spitting. And this reminds me of something I wrote in my first book. I wrote about self-sabotage, and people often ask me like, oh, Toni, how do I know I'm self-sabotaging? How do I know? And I would share similar advice. I would say, well, I often think that self-sabotage rarely has like the fundamental logic, i.e., you are feeling something, but based on zero evidence or minimal evidence. That to me is self-sabotaging. But you know it's valid when there are actions or behaviors that correspond to how you're feeling. So for example, you might think, oh, I'm self-sabotaging because you argued with your boyfriend about the phone call he had, and I don't want to self-sabotage. But the reason why you argued, when you break down the action, is because he picked up the phone, then walked into a separate room to take the phone call, and he doesn't do that with any other phone call. So is it that you had a response based on absolutely nothing, or was there something linked to the response you had? So what was the action, or what was the behavior that triggered you? And is that action or behavior valid? Because I've had friends who are like, oh, Toni, oh my God, I had an argument with him because he did X, Y, Z, I called him and he didn't pick up his phone. And I'm like, when did you call him? I called him at 3. I was like, oh, I thought he had a 9 to 5. Like, does he usually pick up his phone in the afternoon? I mean, like, no, but it's just that, I saw this thing on Instagram and I'm like, oh, so you saw a quote on Instagram and that's making you pick a fight because he didn't pick up his phone at 3 o'clock in the afternoon when he rarely picks up his phone in the day because he has 9 to 5. Like, when you break down the action, you're doing too much. But if you had an issue with him not picking up because he always picks up in the afternoon and all of a sudden he's not picking up and you've noticed his habits have changed recently when it comes to his phone use, okay, maybe your feelings are warranted. So yeah, I completely agree like break it down. Is there something happening that relates to how you're feeling, or is how you're feeling tied solely to past experience?
Yeah.
It's so true. That's such helpful advice. Producer Nisha. Next dilemma. Oh, I love this episode. This is great.
I know, I'm learning so much.
I don't want the dilemmas to end.
You're smashing them, by the way.
You are.
Thank you.
So this one says, "Hey Toni, I'm honestly so tired. Every day it feels like I have to change parts of myself just to fit in. At work, at uni, even sometimes with my own friends. I'm constantly switching up how I act, what I say, just to feel accepted. It's draining. Some days I don't even recognise who I am anymore. I just wish I could be fully myself without worrying who's going to judge me." Do you know what? I relate to this one.
You know what? As you were reading it, I was thinking that you were going to relate to it, because remember the episode we did where I talked about growing up in school and how I didn't always
fit in.
I felt like I never really fit in.
Yeah.
Until like my 30s, I'm like, okay, I'm just happy as I am.
Yeah.
And then you said you had a similar experience.
I feel like my code switching abilities are like
Phenomenal.
next level. Because I've just had to do it for so many years.
Yeah.
Like growing up, but then it comes a point, it's like I don't want to have to code switch.
Yeah.
I want people to just take me as I am and be like, oh yeah, that's just Anisha.
Yeah.
I think in terms of fitting in, I'll say it to clients of, let's break down what fitting in actually means. If you have to fit into a small space, you've got to change your shape and make yourself mold yourself and completely change yourself. Who wants to do that all the time? Because that's really tiring.
Ugh, draining.
Yeah.
But that's essentially what we do. And when we try to fit into society, that's the same thing. We're changing, we're moulding, we're shape-shifting.
I can't even say it.
Shape-shifting, yeah. So I think it is probably a very, valid universal experience. I think we can all relate in some capacity. But I think it's also about maybe asking yourself, and it might be a lot of self-reflection that needs to be done, as to, are there specific people that you feel like you've got to change around? Or is it, at uni, at work, why? Because I know I felt like that when I was at uni at times. I didn't feel like I always fit in. And even on my doctorate training, I was the youngest in my cohort, and I felt like I wasn't taken seriously at times, especially early on. And so I completely can relate, but I think you've got to look and think about, who are you surrounded by when you feel that way, and why? You're both nodding.
We're just nodding, looking at each other.
I'm looking at Anisha, been there. No, but that's so true. And it makes me think about things I've read and things I've written in the past about how people that are your people don't require you to change yourself to be respected by them, to be loved by them, to be appreciated by them.
Yeah.
And when you feel like you cannot get any kind of love or care or respect from someone unless you change yourself, those typically aren't the type of people you should be around. I mean, there are certain environments and settings where we can't avoid that, like work, for example, like you said.
Yeah.
Like I've got to be here. You know what I mean? If you have to be in the office, right? You might not stand your entire team. You might hate your boss, but you have to, have your job for whatever reason. And until you find another job that you like, you kind of have to stick through it, right? And it's unavoidable to a degree in that setting. But when it comes to things like friends, I mean, family is difficult because you can't choose your family. But when it comes to things like friends, or who you hang out with in uni, or who you spend time with socially, or relationships, have you guys ever been in a relationship where you felt like you haven't been authentic 100%?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I feel like we've all a lot of women have gone through this. I've been in a relationship before where I felt like I couldn't be my naturally silly, goofy, quirky, dorky self because I was conscious of how that person would perceive me. Or you have this underlying desire to want to impress someone.
Yeah.
And you're like, okay, if I change myself a bit, I can achieve that. And then that, if anything, that's a reflection of that relationship being wrong for you.
Yeah. And I think also it's about thinking, have you changed over time? So using the relationship example, were you that sparkly, happy, bubbly self at the beginning and slowly you've dulled your sparkle. Because that might not be a you problem, that might be a them problem, that they've maybe subconsciously made you dull yourself down. And again, speaking from experience, I have experienced that, particularly in relationships. And that's a them problem, an insecurity
you're validating
problem.
my feelings right now, Dr. Jade, because I've literally just gone through that. So you're validating how I feel.
And often it's because I'll give clients examples of, if you think of a really secure person who is confident, happy with their life, happy with themselves, really secure in themselves, how do they treat other people?
Yeah.
Do they pull other people down? Do they try and water other people down to make them look great? No, because they're already confident and secure in themselves that they don't need to. In fact, they'll do the opposite. They'll pull people up with them, or they'll cheer other people on.
Yeah.
So actually, it might not always be a you problem. It might also be other people. So it is about acknowledging who you're surrounded by as well. Not everybody is going to like you. And I think, although it's a tough pill to swallow, when you realise that, and you realise that not everybody is going to be your people, that actually it's such a freeing, liberating feeling.
Yes. Yeah, it's so true. With the day I had like the courage to be disliked by people, my life changed. Like just accepting. And it's funny because I'm writing a book at the moment out in 2026. Look out for it. I just plug that in there. I'm writing a book at the moment, and one of the chapters is about that. It's about like feeling comfortable being disliked. And I went through that people pleaser stage where I wanted everyone to like me, and you want that validation, like, oh, I really want people to like me. And I would feel really uncomfortable as a teenager or in my 20s when someone wouldn't like me, because I'm like, oh, what did I do? How can I make this better? But now when someone doesn't like me, I'm like, I do not give a rat's. Like, I couldn't care less. Like, you don't like me? I love me. So it is what it is. But it's so true. Like, when you let go of that desire to be liked, then you live more authentically, because you accept the fact that, okay, I can't please everyone. I just have to like live for my own joy and my own fulfillment. But you heard it here first from Dr. Jade. Like, just be yourself. And if people dislike you for it, then sod off. To our dilemma senders, I really hope this long segment of Tea Time with Toni helped you. Massive shout out, Dr. Jade. You absolutely smashed it. And producer Anisha and I are part of the pod, and we were sat here like, yeah, that's so helpful. I completely relate. I feel like we have benefited from every single dilemma that was submitted.
Benefited so. I'm actually going to look into therapy after this. So thank you so much.
You're so welcome.
And hopefully lots of other people listening will be like, actually, I feel empowered to have a therapy session. If you have any more dilemmas you want to send to us, please do send them via either Instagram DM or the email inbox, toni@tonitoldmepod.com. That is all from me and Dr. Jade. But to wrap up this episode, you know that I always leave you with some positive words. I guess like my positive words for today are going to focus on support, asking for help. I think the people who sent the dilemmas have done an amazing job in being vulnerable and submitting the dilemmas. And someone like myself, or even producer Anisha, would struggle with doing that. So you're moving in the right direction. And I think my positive advice is exactly that. Dr. Jade does what she does because she understands the value of supporting others and giving them the tools to make changes in their own life. But you can't make those changes if you are unwilling, one, to admit that there is an issue in the first place, and two, to ask for support. So my positive words are just going to focus on that, what Dr. Jade echoed earlier, that it's actually very normal to not always have everything all together and be in control of your life. Like, no one is 100% in control all the time. We all have areas that we struggle with. That's totally normal. It's totally human. So don't feel ashamed if that's your situation, and don't feel ashamed for looking for support. Maybe it is therapy that you want to pursue. Do that with the understanding that it doesn't mean anything is wrong with you. we all need a little help. And sometimes you might go to therapy just because you want to maintain the greatness that is the happiness you are experiencing at the moment. And maybe you don't want it to be short-lived. And you're like, actually, I'm in a great space. I want to continue that. I want to maintain that. And that's why you seek therapy. But whatever the reason, I want you to know that it's totally fine for you to speak to someone else. It doesn't even have to be a therapist. It could be a friend. It could be a family member. But like Dr. Jade said earlier, the one is a mind reader. So in order for people to help you, you have to be open, you have to be honest, and you have to be transparent. And Dr. Jade, I don't know if you had any words you wanted to share with people to wrap up your amazing segment.
Oh, thank you. No, I think just echoing what you've said, that actually, I personally think everybody should go to therapy just for the experience, just to really see what it's like. And I think in terms of when you are looking for a therapist, please make sure that they are licensed.
Oh, yes.
That is one thing. Please make sure that they are licensed. You've got various different things, so do your research. So you've got counsellors, psychotherapists, or psychologists. So they are all very different, and it can get really confusing. But ensure that they are licensed with a registered governing body. So if you're in the UK, it would be things like BACP, BABCP, and UKCP. And if you're looking for a psychologist, it would be with HCPC, which is the Health and Care Professions Council. So so I think everyone should explore maybe therapy, but if that's not an option for you, I think about your support network. Who are your nearest and dearest? Who are the people that you trust in your life? And like you said, sort of echoing from earlier, that nobody is a mind reader. So, and it doesn't make you weak for asking for support. You know, we're not robots. We're not expected to go through life robotically.
Well, thank you so much, Dr. Jade. That is all from us this week. But please make sure you share, you follow the podcast. If you found it helpful or you think someone else will find it helpful, please send it to them. And make sure you follow on socials too. And if you want to get engaged in any conversation regarding this episode, hashtag Toni told me on social media so we can find all of your content. Bye, guys.